When NASA's James Webb Space Telescope picks up a rhythmic signal from deep space, billions of light-years beyond the known universe, scientists realize something extraordinary. The pattern isn't random. It carries structure, intelligence, and intention. As the world debates whether this is proof of alien life or something far stranger, a small team of astrophysicists races to decode the message. What they discover changes everything. This isn't just a signal from another galaxy. It's a warning about something coming to ours. But what could be so dangerous that an advanced civilization would reach across the cosmos to warn us? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Wednesday morning arrived with the metallic taste of autumn rain. Eleanor's alarm went off at 4:30, as it had for more years than she cared to count. The ritual was comforting in its predictability. Shower, coffee, toast with marmalade, the drive through empty streets to Goddard. The security guard at the gate, Miguel, waved her through with a smile. "Been here longer than I have," he'd once told her. "You and me, we're the old guard now." The building was quiet at this hour, just the hum of HVAC systems and the distant sound of servers in the computer wing. Eleanor's footsteps echoed in the stairwell. She preferred the stairs to the elevator, liked the physical exertion, the way it cleared her mind before settling into the day's work. Her office smelled of old paper and the lavender air freshener the cleaning crew used. She kept it tidy but not sterile. Framed photographs on the credenza showed younger versions of herself and David at various telescopes, professional conferences. Sarah as a gap-toothed child holding a model of the solar system. A shelf held her published papers, bound volumes representing 3 decades of careful observation and analysis. She powered up her workstation and pulled up the overnight data stream. Webb had continued its deep field observations, accumulating more information about that distant region of space. The anomaly she'd flagged yesterday was still there, Eleanor noticed. The pattern persisted across multiple observation cycles. That was unusual. Instrument noise tended to be random or clearly correlated with known interference sources. This was neither. She pulled up the spectral analysis tools and began examining the signal in detail. The pattern repeated every 7.3 seconds, a precise interval that immediately struck her as significant. Natural phenomena rarely produce such exact periodicity. Pulsars could, but this wasn't coming from a pulsar. The signature was all wrong, appearing simultaneously across multiple wavelengths in a way that violated conventional astrophysics. Eleanor felt a familiar flutter in her chest, equal parts excitement and dread. This could be something. Or it could be nothing, another humiliation waiting to happen. She forced herself to breathe slowly, to approach it methodically. Document everything. Verify the instrumentation. Check for known interference sources. Rule out the mundane before entertaining the extraordinary. She spent 2 hours running diagnostics, confirming that Webb's sensors were functioning normally, that the signal wasn't an artifact of data processing or transmission. It remained stubbornly present. That 7.3-second pulse emanating from a region of space so distant that the light reaching the telescope had begun its journey before Earth existed. Marcus arrived at 7:15, right on schedule, carrying a white paper bag spotted with grease from fresh pastries. He stopped in Eleanor's doorway, took one look at her face, and set the bag down carefully on her desk. "What is it?" he said. Eleanor gestured at her screen. "I need you to look at something. Tell me I'm not seeing things." Marcus pulled up a chair, adjusted his glasses, and studied the data. Eleanor watched his expression shift from casual interest to focused attention to something approaching wonder. He scrolled through the spectral analysis, cross-referenced the wavelength patterns, checked the timestamps. "This is still here," he said quietly. "From yesterday, yes, you verified the instruments. 3 times. He sat back, fingers drumming against his knee, in the unconscious rhythm that meant his mind was racing. "Eleanor, this is coming from 13.8 billion light-years away. I know, that's essentially the edge of the observable universe. I know, natural phenomena don't produce patterns like this." Eleanor met his eyes. "I know." They sat in silence for a long moment. Outside Eleanor's window, the morning sky was brightening, rain clouds breaking up to reveal patches of blue. Somewhere in the building, someone was making coffee, and the rich aroma drifted down the hallway. Normal things, ordinary things, the texture of a regular Wednesday morning. Marcus finally spoke. "We need to bring Amara in on this." "Not yet," Eleanor said. "Let's verify it independently first. You analyze it without looking at my work. See if you reach the same conclusions. And if I do, then we'll tell Amara and Tom, and then we'll decide what this means." Marcus nodded slowly. He understood what she wasn't saying. The weight of history, the scars from last time, the career-ending consequences of being wrong about something like this. He picked up the pastry bag, handed her a bear claw, took a cruller for himself. "Okay," he said. "Give me 4 hours." Eleanor took a bite of pastry, barely tasting it. 4 hours. In 4 hours, either this would resolve into mundane explanation or her life would change forever. She'd spent 15 years being careful, being skeptical, never allowing herself to hope for the extraordinary. But hope was a stubborn thing. It had a way of surviving despite your best efforts to kill it. Those 4 hours stretched like years. Eleanor tried to focus on other work, reviewing grant proposals, responding to emails from graduate students, but her eyes kept drifting to the clock. She thought about calling Sarah, then didn't. What would she say? I might have found something extraordinary, or I might be repeating the worst mistake of my career. Neither seemed like a good opening. At 11:30, Marcus appeared in her doorway. His expression was carefully neutral, which told Eleanor everything before he said a word. "It's real," he said. "Whatever this is, it's real. The pattern is consistent across every analysis I can throw at it. Eleanor, this isn't instrument noise. This isn't interference. This is a signal, and it's coming from beyond the edge of everything we know." Eleanor's hands were shaking slightly. She pressed them flat against her desk. "We need to bring in Amara, yes, and Tom. Yes." Marcus stepped fully into her office and closed the door behind him. "And Eleanor, we need to be prepared for what happens next. Because once we report this, everything changes." She knew he was right. But sitting there in her office, with the autumn sun finally breaking through the clouds outside, Eleanor Vance allowed herself one moment of pure, uncomplicated wonder. After 30 years of searching, she might have finally found what she'd been looking for. The emergency meeting convened in the third-floor conference room at 1 o'clock that afternoon. Tom Berkeley arrived first, his weathered face unreadable as he took his usual seat at the head of the scratched wooden table. Amara came next, her laptop already open, fingers flying across the keyboard before she'd even sat down. Marcus poured coffee from the ancient pot in the corner, the same pot that had been brewing terrible coffee since Eleanor started at Goddard. Eleanor stood at the window, watching rain begin to fall again across the parking lot. She'd done this before, gathered colleagues to share what she thought was a groundbreaking discovery. Last time it ended in professional humiliation. This time felt different, but maybe that's what she'd thought last time too. Tom cleared his throat. "You said this was urgent." Eleanor turned from the window. She'd prepared a careful presentation, slides showing the spectral analysis, the verification protocols, the mathematical improbability of the pattern being natural. But looking at her mentor's patient face, at Marcus's steady presence, at Amara's barely contained curiosity, she decided to just tell them the truth. "Webb has detected a signal," she said, "from 13.8 billion light-years away. It repeats every 7.3 seconds with mathematical precision. It appears simultaneously across gamma-ray, radio, and visible light spectrums in a way that shouldn't be physically possible. Marcus has independently verified my analysis. We've ruled out instrument malfunction, known interference sources, and natural phenomena. What we're looking at is either the most bizarre astrophysical object ever discovered, or it's artificial." The silence that followed was profound. Rain drummed against the windows. Somewhere down the hall, a phone rang unanswered. Amara spoke first. "Show me." Eleanor connected her laptop to the projector. The wall screen filled with cascading data, the signal rendered in multicolored visualization. She walked them through the discovery, the verification process, every step they'd taken to ensure accuracy. She showed them the spectral analysis chart, the impossible readings that placed the signal's origin at the very edge of observable space. Tom leaned forward, studying the screen with the intensity of a man who'd spent 4 decades evaluating scientific claims. "How confident are you in this?" 95%, Eleanor said. "Maybe higher. But Tom, you know what happened last time I thought I'd found something." "This is different," Marcus said quietly. "Last time you were working alone, rushing to announce. This time we've been careful. Multiple verification protocols, independent analysis. This is real." Amara was already running calculations on her laptop. "Can I access the raw data?" Eleanor shared the files. Amara's screen filled with numbers, patterns, frequency distributions. She worked in silence for 20 minutes, while the others waited. Eleanor found herself holding her breath, even though Marcus had already confirmed her findings. Amara's expertise was in patterns, in finding structure where others saw noise. If anyone could punch holes in their analysis, it would be her. Finally, Amara looked up. Her dark eyes were wide with something between fear and exhilaration. "This isn't just a signal," she said. "This is a message. Look at these embedded sequences. Prime numbers, mathematical constants. Pi, the golden ratio, Planck's constant. This is someone trying to establish communication using universal language. The weight of it settled over the room like a physical presence." Eleanor felt lightheaded, as if the floor had tilted slightly beneath her feet. After 30 years of searching, after the humiliation and doubt and endless patient observation, they'd found it. Proof that humanity wasn't alone. Tom stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "Protocol requires we report this immediately to the director. She'll inform the White House, the Pentagon, probably convene a classified briefing within hours. Once that happens, this leaves our control entirely." Eleanor joined him at the window. "What do you recommend?" Tom was quiet for a long moment. "I recommend we take the next 72 hours to analyze this as thoroughly as possible before we report it. Document everything, verify beyond any doubt, and try to decode as much of the message as we can. Because once we go public, this becomes political. It becomes military. It stops being science and becomes something else entirely. That's against protocol," Marcus pointed out. Tom turned from the window, and Eleanor saw something in his face she'd never seen before. A kind of resignation mixed with determination. "I've been following protocol for 40 years. I'm 62 years old, and I'm looking at the most important discovery in human history. If they fire me for taking 3 days to ensure we get this right, I can live with that." Amara closed her laptop. "I'm in, but we work fast. 72 hours means we don't sleep much." Marcus nodded. "I'll set up isolated workstations. We keep this contained to just the 4 of us until we're ready." Eleanor felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she'd been carrying since the moment she first saw the pattern. They were with her. They believed her. They were willing to risk their careers alongside hers. They worked through the night. Tom arranged for the building's security logs to show them leaving at normal hours while they actually stayed. Doors locked, phones silenced. Eleanor set up a cot in her office, but didn't use it. Sleep felt impossible with the universe whispering secrets through the data streams. By dawn, they'd mapped the signal's structure in detail. It wasn't a simple repeating pattern, but rather a complex layered message. The 7.3-second pulse was just the surface. Beneath it lay deeper rhythms, faster oscillations that contained the actual information. Amara compared it to a carrier wave in radio transmission, the pulse providing timing, while the embedded variations carried meaning. The mathematical constants were clearly intentional, a way of saying, we understand the fundamental laws of physics, we're intelligent, we're trying to communicate. But beyond that initial handshake, the message became more complex. Amara identified what appeared to be coordinate systems, three-dimensional mappings that might represent locations in space. Marcus made the next crucial discovery at 4 in the morning, his eyes red-rimmed from staring at screens. The signal's origin point was impossible, not just unlikely, but actually impossible according to current cosmological models. 13.8 billion light-years placed it at the edge of the observable universe, at the moment just after the Big Bang. But the universe's expansion meant that nothing from that era should be visible in the way this signal appeared. Unless, Marcus said slowly, his voice hoarse from too much coffee and not enough sleep, unless it's not actually coming from that distance. What if it's coming from somewhere else entirely, and the distance measurement is telling us something different? What if the signal is encoded with its own origin information, and that information is showing us when it was sent, not where? Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. You're suggesting time displacement. I'm suggesting we don't fully understand what we're looking at yet. Tom had been pacing the conference room for hours, and he stopped now, turning to face them. There's something else we need to consider. I've been monitoring other observatories. Mauna Kea picked up an anomaly 6 hours ago. So did the Very Large Array. They haven't identified it as the same signal yet, but they will. We have maybe another day before someone else announces this. The timeline was collapsing. Eleanor had hoped for 72 hours, but they might have less than 24. She looked at her team, at 3 people who'd become more than colleagues over the years. Marcus, who'd held her hand at her husband's funeral. Amara, brilliant and uncompromising. Tom, who'd protected her career when she had no reason to trust herself. Then we work faster, she said. Amara, focus on decoding those coordinate systems. Marcus, keep analyzing the temporal signatures. Tom, monitor other observatories and buy us whatever time you can. I'll work on the signal's physical properties, try to understand how something can broadcast across multiple wavelengths simultaneously. They dispersed to their separate tasks. Eleanor returned to her office as weak sunlight began filtering through the October clouds. She pulled up the spectral analysis again, studying the way the signal manifested across the electromagnetic spectrum. It wasn't just appearing in multiple wavelengths. It was the same signal, perfectly synchronized, as if the photons themselves were entangled across vast distances. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Mom? Did you forget about dinner tonight? I'm in town for a work thing. Wanted to see you." Eleanor stared at the message. She'd completely forgotten. Sarah rarely came to Maryland, and Eleanor had missed the opportunity. She started to type an apology, then stopped. What could she say that wouldn't sound like another excuse? Another time when work mattered more than family? She set the phone down and returned to the data. The signal pulsed on her screen, regular as a heartbeat, carrying information across billions of years. Someone out there had sent this message. Someone had looked up at their own sky and decided to reach out into the void, hoping someone would listen. Eleanor understood that impulse completely, the desire to connect, to be heard, to leave something behind that mattered. She'd spent her whole life reaching toward the stars. Now the stars were reaching back. And she couldn't stop, couldn't turn away, even for her daughter. Especially not now. The first 72 hours blurred into a continuous present, time marked only by coffee cups accumulated on desks and the changing quality of light through the windows. Eleanor slept in 90-minute fragments, her head on her folded arms, waking with keyboard imprints on her cheek. The building's night-cleaning crew learned to work around them. Miguel, the security guard, bringing them sandwiches from the vending machines at 3 in the morning. Marcus was the one who discovered the multi-wavelength phenomenon's true nature. Not simultaneous broadcast, but quantum entanglement on a scale that shouldn't be possible. The photons weren't traveling from the signal's source. They were being created here, now, entangled with particles that existed billions of years ago. The signal was reaching forward through time itself. That changes everything. Amara said when Marcus presented his findings. If this is quantum communication, then distance becomes meaningless. The signal could be coming from anywhere, any when. Eleanor stood at the whiteboard in the conference room, marker in hand, trying to map the implications. The coordinates Amara had decoded weren't just locations in space, they were locations in space-time. Points where something significant would happen, or had happened, or was happening in some dimension of causality they didn't yet understand. On the third day, complications arrived in the form of Dr. Richard Castellano. Eleanor saw the news alert on her phone at 6 in the morning. MIT astronomer announces detection of possible extraterrestrial signal. Castellano's face filled the screen, his practiced smile and perfectly styled grey hair. He'd always been ambitious, more interested in publicity than patient research. Now he'd beaten them to the announcement, citing preliminary data from collaborating observatories. Tom took the call from the director at 7. Eleanor could hear his side of the conversation through the closed door. Yes, we detected it too. Yes, we've been analyzing it. No, we haven't published because we wanted to verify thoroughly the false positive 15 years ago. Yes, I understand. We'll brief you this afternoon. When Tom emerged, his face was grim. We're out of time. Director wants a full presentation at 2. Pentagon will be on video conference, probably White House staff too. This goes official today, whether we're ready or not. But we still don't understand what we're looking at, Marcus protested. Doesn't matter. Castellano forced her hand. Eleanor felt anger rising, hot and sharp. Castellano had always done this. Rushed to publish before verification, prioritized headlines over accuracy. And now he'd stolen their discovery, their 3 days of careful work. She wanted to throw something, wanted to scream. Instead, she took a slow breath and turned to Amara. What can we say with certainty? Amara pulled up her analysis. The signal is artificial. It contains mathematical structures that indicate intelligence. It's using quantum entanglement to bypass light speed limitations. And the coordinates it's encoding point to 13 locations on Earth. 13 locations, Eleanor repeated. Specific places? Specific to within 10 meters. I've mapped them. They're scattered across the globe. One in Yellowstone, one at CERN, one in the Sahara Desert. The pattern isn't random, but I can't determine the selection criteria yet. Eleanor's phone buzzed again. Another text from Sarah, this one terse. Fine, don't bother explaining. I should be used to this by now. The guilt stabbed through Eleanor's exhaustion. She'd never replied to the previous message, had let dinner pass without acknowledgement. She started to type a response, but what could she say? I'm sorry I missed you, but I discovered proof that we're not alone in the universe. It sounded absurd even to her. Marcus appeared beside her, his voice gentle. You should call her. After the briefing. Eleanor, call her now. This won't wait, and neither should she. But Marcus didn't understand. Couldn't understand. If Eleanor stopped now, if she let herself feel the weight of all the times she'd chosen work over family, she might not be able to continue. And she had to continue. This was too important. The entire trajectory of human civilization might depend on what they learned from this signal. She pocketed her phone. After the briefing, she repeated. The morning disappeared into preparation. They compiled their findings into a presentation that would make sense to administrators and military officials who didn't have advanced physics degrees. Eleanor practiced her delivery, trying to strike a balance between scientific rigor and accessible explanation. She'd done hundreds of presentations in her career, but never one with stakes like this. At noon, Tom gathered them in the conference room. Before we do this, he said, I want you all to understand something. After today, your lives change. You'll be famous, scrutinized, questioned endlessly. Intelligence agencies will want to debrief you. Media will camp outside your homes. Whatever privacy you had ends today. Are you prepared for that? Eleanor thought about the question. Was she prepared? No, but she'd been preparing for this moment her entire career. Every paper published, every lecture delivered, every night spent analyzing data when she could have been home with her family. This was what it had all been for, wasn't it? The one discovery that would justify everything. "I'm ready," she said. Marcus and Amara nodded their agreement. Tom looked at each of them in turn, then checked his watch. "Then let's go make history." The briefing room was on the first floor, a secure space used for classified meetings. When they arrived, Eleanor was startled by the number of people already assembled. The director, obviously, but also military personnel in uniform. Staffers she recognized from congressional committees, faces on video screens representing other agencies and departments. A woman in an expensive suit sat in the front row, her expression unreadable. Tom had warned her about General Patricia Hawthorne from the Defense Department, a career officer with a reputation for seeing everything through a strategic lens. Eleanor stepped to the podium, suddenly aware of how she must look. 3 days without proper sleep, her hair pulled back in a hasty knot, coffee stains on her cardigan. But her hands were steady as she pulled up the first slide, and her voice when she spoke carried the authority of 3 decades spent studying the cosmos. She walked them through the discovery chronologically. The initial detection, the verification protocols, Marcus's independent confirmation. She showed them the spectral analysis, explaining in plain language why the signal's properties ruled out natural phenomena. She presented Amara's work on the mathematical structures, the prime numbers and constants that clearly indicated intelligence. Then she showed them the coordinates. The room went very quiet. 13 points on Earth, marked with precision, that suggested whoever sent this signal knew our planet intimately. One of the military officers raised his hand. "Are these strategic locations?" "Military installations." Eleanor shook her head. "Not that we can determine. One is at CERN, the particle physics laboratory in Switzerland. One is in Yellowstone National Park. Others are in remote locations with no obvious significance. We haven't been able to identify a pattern yet." General Hawthorne leaned forward. "Dr. Vance, you mentioned quantum entanglement. Does that mean this signal represents a technology we don't possess?" Eleanor chose her words carefully. "The signal utilizes quantum effects in ways we don't currently understand. Whether that constitutes technology in the sense you mean, I can't say. What I can tell you is that the physics involved goes beyond our current theoretical models. Could it be weaponized?" The question hung in the air. Eleanor felt Marcus tense beside her. This was the moment Tom had warned them about, when science became security, when discovery became strategy. "I'm not a weapons specialist," Eleanor said. "I'm an astrophysicist. My concern is understanding what this signal means and who sent it." "Understanding it is how we determine if it's a threat," Hawthorne replied. "Dr. Vance, I respect your scientific curiosity, but my job is to protect this country. If someone out there has technology that can manipulate quantum states across billions of light years, I need to know if that technology poses a danger to us." Eleanor met the general's eyes. "With respect, General, we barely understand what we're looking at. Speculating about weaponization at this stage would be premature and potentially dangerous. What we should be focusing on is decoding the complete message. These coordinates are clearly important, but we don't know why yet. There's more information embedded in the signal that we haven't been able to extract. How long until you can decode it fully?" Eleanor glanced at Amara, who gave a slight shrug. "Days, possibly weeks. The signal structure is incredibly complex. We're essentially trying to learn an alien language with no Rosetta Stone," the director spoke up. "In the meantime, we need to manage this situation carefully. Dr. Castellano's announcement has already triggered global attention. Other nations are analyzing the signal. We can't keep this quiet, but we can control the narrative. Dr. Vance, you and your team will be the official face of this discovery. We'll coordinate all public statements through NASA communications. Nothing gets released without approval." Eleanor felt the cage closing around them. She'd known this would happen, but the reality was more constricting than she'd imagined. Tom caught her eye and gave a small nod. This was the price of discovery. The meeting continued for another 2 hours. Logistics, security protocols, coordination with other agencies. By the time they emerged, evening had fallen. Eleanor felt hollowed out, running on nothing but nervous energy and too much coffee. Marcus put a hand on her shoulder. "You did well in there, did I?" It felt like watching our work get absorbed into bureaucracy. That's because it is being absorbed into bureaucracy. But Eleanor, we're still the ones doing the actual science. They can manage the politics, but they need us to understand the signal. We still have agency here. Eleanor wanted to believe him, but as she returned to her office and saw the stack of messages waiting, the requests for interviews, the emails from reporters, the notification that her building was surrounded by news vans, she felt control slipping away. This discovery was supposed to be hers, supposed to be the culmination of her life's work. Instead, it was becoming a circus. She closed her office door and finally called Sarah. The phone rang 4 times before her daughter answered. "Mum." "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I know I missed dinner. I know I didn't explain. But something happened at work, something significant, and I couldn't step away." There was a long pause. Sarah's voice when she spoke was tired. "I saw the news, the signal from space. That was you, wasn't it?" "Yes, of course it was." Another silence, and Eleanor could hear traffic in the background. Sarah was probably walking back to her hotel, alone, after another evening spent waiting for a mother who didn't show up. "I'm happy for you, Mom. Really. I know this is what you've always wanted." "Sarah, please. Let me explain." "You don't need to explain. I understand. I've always understood. Your work is important. More important than dinner, more important than birthdays, more important than being there when people need you. And maybe you're right. Maybe discovering aliens or whatever this is matters more than one dinner with your daughter." The words cut deeper than Eleanor expected. "It's not like that, isn't it? Dad used to say you were searching for something out there because you couldn't find it here. I never knew what he meant, but I think I'm starting to." Eleanor felt tears building behind her eyes. "Your father understood what this work means. He also understood what you were missing. And he loved you anyway. I'm trying to do the same, Mum, but it's hard when you make it so clear that I'm not the priority. You are a priority. You're my daughter. Then act like it. Just once, act like I matter as much as your telescopes and your data and your search for meaning in empty space." The line went dead. Eleanor sat holding the phone, staring at the dark screen. Sarah was right, of course. She'd always been right. Eleanor had chosen the stars over the people in her life, again and again, and now the stars were finally answering back, and she was still alone. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Amara entered carrying 2 cups of tea. "Thought you might need this." Eleanor accepted the cup gratefully. The warmth helped, though it couldn't touch the cold hollowness in her chest. "Thank you." Amara settled into the chair across from Eleanor's desk. "I heard you on the phone. Sounded rough." "My daughter. I missed dinner with her. Again." Amara sipped her tea. "Can I tell you something? When I was finishing my doctorate, I was obsessed. Worked 18-hour days, ignored everyone in my life, convinced myself that the research was all that mattered. I missed my sister's wedding because I was running a crucial analysis. She didn't speak to me for 2 years. What did you do? I realized that being brilliant at my work while failing at everything else wasn't actually success. So I learned to balance, set boundaries, made time for the people who matter. And you know what? My research didn't suffer. If anything, it improved because I was healthier, more grounded." Eleanor looked at the tea in her hands. "I don't know if I can do that. This signal, it's everything I've worked for. How do I walk away from it even for a day?" "You don't walk away. You just learn that it's not the only thing. Eleanor, we're going to be working on this for months, maybe years. If you burn every relationship in your life chasing it, what will you have at the end? A discovery and no one to share it with?" Before Eleanor could respond, her computer chimed. A new email from Tom. Subject line, Priority 1. She clicked it open. The message was brief. Gravitational anomaly detected. "Conference room now." Eleanor and Amara exchanged glances. They left the tea cooling on the desk and headed down the hallway. Marcus was already in the conference room with Tom, both men staring at a laptop screen. "What is it?" Eleanor asked. Tom turned the laptop so they could see. "Military satellites have been tracking gravitational disturbances for the past week. Small fluctuations, barely detectable. They assumed it was instrumentation error, but the pattern matches the signal's frequency exactly. Eleanor leaned closer to the screen, studying the data. Gravitational waves at 7.3-second intervals. And that's not all, Marcus said quietly. The disturbances are emanating from the 13 coordinates, the same locations encoded in the signal. Whatever this is, it's not just a message. Something is happening at those sites, something physical. Eleanor felt the floor shift beneath her. They'd been so focused on decoding the message, understanding its origin, that they hadn't considered it might be more than communication. The signal might be a precursor to something else entirely. "Have you told General Hawthorne?" she asked. Tom nodded. "Emergency briefing scheduled for tomorrow morning. But Eleanor, there's something else you need to see." He pulled up another file. This one showed the gravitational measurements over time, graphed to show progression. The disturbances had been increasing steadily since the signal was first detected. Not random fluctuations, but a clear exponential curve. "It's getting stronger," Eleanor said. "Whatever is happening at those 13 locations is building towards something." Marcus traced the curve with his finger. "If this progression continues at the current rate, we're looking at significant gravitational effects within 2 weeks. Maybe less." "Significant how?" Amara asked. Marcus met her eyes. "Potentially catastrophic. We're talking about localized space-time distortions. Reality itself might become unstable at those points." Eleanor looked at the coordinates displayed on the screen. 13 dots scattered across the planet. One of them was Yellowstone, sitting atop a supervolcano. Another was near a major fault line. If gravitational forces started fluctuating unpredictably, the consequences could be devastating. The signal wasn't just a message, she realized. It was a countdown. The emergency briefing the next morning had an entirely different tenor. General Hawthorne arrived with a team of analysts and what appeared to be representatives from Homeland Security. The gravity of the situation had shifted from scientific curiosity to potential global crisis. Eleanor stood at the podium again, but this time Marcus and Amara flanked her, a united front against whatever demands might come. Tom opened the meeting. "What we're about to share changes the parameters of this situation significantly. Dr. Chen has been analyzing the gravitational anomalies. Marcus, please explain what you found." Marcus stepped forward, his movements slightly stiff. Eleanor noticed he was favoring his left side, the early symptoms of his condition becoming more apparent under stress. "The signal is not merely communication," he said. "It's accompanied by measurable gravitational effects at the 13 coordinates. These effects are increasing exponentially. Based on current progression, we estimate significant space-time distortion will occur at these locations within 12 to 14 days. "What does space-time distortion mean in practical terms?" Hawthorne asked. Marcus pulled up a simulation on the screen. "In practical terms, reality breaks down. Matter behaves unpredictably. Causality becomes nonlinear. Objects might exist in multiple states simultaneously or cease to exist entirely. We're essentially looking at points where the normal laws of physics stop functioning." The room erupted in questions. Eleanor let Marcus field them, watching the faces of the officials as they grappled with concepts that sounded like science fiction. But the data didn't lie. The gravitational readings were real, and they were accelerating toward something catastrophic. After an hour of back and forth, Hawthorne called for order. "We need to evacuate the areas around these coordinates, establish exclusion zones, move civilian populations to safety. That could cause mass panic," one of the Homeland Security representatives pointed out. "How do we explain why we're evacuating without telling them the truth? And if we do tell them the truth, how do we prevent global chaos?" Another voice added. Eleanor had been silent, but now she spoke. "General, evacuating might not be enough. If the gravitational effects reach the magnitude Marcus is predicting, distance won't matter. A space-time distortion at Yellowstone could affect the entire region, possibly the continent. We need to understand what's causing this and how to stop it." Hawthorne turned her sharp gaze on Eleanor. "Do you have a way to stop it?" "Not yet. But we've only begun to decode the signal. There has to be more information embedded in it. Instructions, explanations, something that tells us what's happening and why." You're asking me to bet millions of lives on a hypothesis, Hawthorne said. I'm asking you to give us time to understand what we're facing before we react. Panic and evacuation might make things worse if we don't know what we're dealing with. A tense silence filled the room. Tom finally spoke up. General, Dr. Vance has a point. We need more information before we make decisions of this magnitude. Give her team 1 week to decode more of the signal. If they can't determine the nature of the threat by then, we implement evacuation protocols. Hawthorne considered this 1 week, but I want daily briefings. And Dr. Vance, if these gravitational effects accelerate beyond your projections, we don't wait. Clear. As the meeting dispersed, Amara pulled Eleanor aside. A week isn't enough time. The signal's complexity is orders of magnitude beyond anything I've worked with. Then we work faster, Eleanor said. We bring in help. Anyone you trust who can assist with the decoding. That means expanding the circle. More people who know. More potential leaks. We don't have a choice. Over the next 48 hours, their small team expanded to include specialists from around the country. Cryptographers, mathematicians, linguists, physicists, all sworn to secrecy, all working around the clock in secured facilities. Goddard transformed into a command center, every available workstation dedicated to analyzing different aspects of the signal. Eleanor barely slept. When exhaustion forced her to close her eyes, she dreamed in cascading data patterns, mathematical structures that dissolved into incomprehensibility whenever she tried to grasp them. She survived on coffee and determination, pushing her body beyond its limits because stopping wasn't an option. On the 4th day, Amara made the breakthrough. She'd been working with a team of computational linguists, treating the signal not as a message, but as a language structure. And within that structure, she'd found something remarkable. Eleanor, Marcus, and Tom gathered around her workstation. Amara pulled up her analysis, hands trembling slightly with exhaustion and excitement. The signal contains layers, she explained. We've been decoding the surface layer, the mathematical constants and coordinates. But beneath that is another layer, and beneath that another. It's recursive. Each layer contains more complex information than the last. How many layers? Eleanor asked. At least 7 that I can detect, possibly more. And when I started decoding the 2nd layer, I found this. She displayed an image on the screen. Not a photograph, but a rendered visualization of decoded data. It showed DNA sequences, unmistakably terrestrial. Human DNA? That's impossible, Marcus said. Amara zoomed in on specific sections of the sequence. Not just human. This exact sequence includes markers unique to modern humans. Homo sapiens. It's our DNA, not some convergent evolution or similar species. Ours. Eleanor felt the world tilting. A signal from the edge of the universe containing human genetic information. The implications cascaded through her mind, each more impossible than the last. There's more, Amara continued. The DNA isn't random. It's tagged, labeled using the same mathematical framework as the rest of the message. And the labels are names. She pulled up another section. This one is tagged with your name, Eleanor. Dr. Eleanor Vance. Your complete genetic sequence is embedded in this signal. The room went silent. Eleanor stared at her own DNA, rendered in abstract visualization, sent by something or someone billions of light years away. How could anyone out there know her genome? Know her name? Tom's voice was strained. Check the other team members. Amara nodded, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Moments later, more sequences appeared. Marcus Chen, Amara Okafor, and dozens of others, people Eleanor didn't recognize, but who presumably existed somewhere on Earth. This isn't a message to humanity, Eleanor said slowly, her mind racing to process the impossibility. This is a message to specific people. To us, but why? Marcus asked. What makes us special? I don't know yet. But Eleanor, there's something else. Amara pulled up a temporal analysis. I ran dating protocols on the signal itself, analyzing the quantum state of the photons. The signal is old, not just a few billion years. It's older than the universe itself. That's impossible, Tom said. Nothing can be older than the universe. Unless, Eleanor said, the words feeling strange in her mouth, unless it came from before, from a previous universe. The silence that followed was profound. They all knew the theoretical frameworks, the cosmological models that suggested the universe might be cyclical, expanding and collapsing and rebirthing in an eternal cycle. But those were abstractions, mathematical exercises, not reality. Marcus leaned heavily against the desk. If the signal is from a previous universal iteration, then whoever sent it knew what was coming, knew that their universe would end and ours would begin. They encoded this information and found a way to transmit it forward through the collapse and rebirth of all existence. Eleanor's mind was reeling. The gravitational distortions, the countdown, the human DNA. It was all connected, but she couldn't quite see the pattern yet. Why send a message forward through time? What could be so important? Amara pulled up another file. I decoded more of the second layer. There's text, written in English using the same mathematical encoding. She displayed it on the screen. The words appeared simple, almost mundane, but they sent chills through Eleanor's spine. Convergence approaching. Protocol must be implemented. Survival depends on coordination. Time is non-linear. You are us. We are you. What does convergence mean? Tom asked. Eleanor was already pulling up the gravitational data, comparing it with the signal structure. The 13 coordinates, the increasing distortions, the countdown. It all pointed to something coming, something that would happen simultaneously at all 13 locations. She turned to Marcus. What if the gravitational effects aren't a side effect of the signal? What if they're the point? What if something is supposed to happen at those coordinates and the signal is warning us about it? Or instructing us to prepare for it, Amara added. Look at this next section. She displayed more decoded text. This time, it included technical specifications, energy requirements, mathematical formulas that described quantum field manipulation. It read like an instruction manual. This is telling us how to build something, Amara said. Some kind of device. The specifications are incredibly precise. Marcus studied the formulas. These energy levels are beyond anything we can currently generate. We'd need particle accelerators, massive power sources, coordinated activation across all 13 sites. Tom looked grim. One of those sites is CERN. They have the largest particle accelerator on Earth, and Yellowstone sits on a geothermal hotspot, Eleanor added. Natural energy source. The coordinates aren't random. They're strategic. Whoever sent this message chose locations where we'd have the resources to implement whatever they're instructing us to do. But we still don't know what it is, Marcus said, or why we need to do it. Eleanor turned back to the screen, studying the decoded instructions. Then we keep decoding. We have 6 days until Hawthorne implements evacuation. We use every minute to understand this message completely. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Eleanor almost didn't look, but something made her check. The message was simple. I'm sorry about the other night. I know your work is important. I'm proud of you even when I'm angry. Love you. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. She typed back quickly before she could overthink it. Love you too. I'm sorry I keep missing things. Can we talk tonight? The response came within seconds. Yes, I'm staying in town a few more days. Call when you can. Eleanor pocketed her phone, feeling something loosen in her chest. Maybe Amara was right. Maybe she could do this work and still maintain the relationships that mattered. Maybe it wasn't too late to find balance. But first, they had to save the world. Over the next 3 days, their expanded team worked with desperate intensity. The deeper layers of the signal revealed more instructions, more technical specifications, but also fragments of something else. Personal messages, recorded thoughts, reflections that seemed almost like diary entries. And they were all written by people on their team. Marcus found his own words embedded in the third layer. Observations about stellar evolution he'd never published. Thoughts he'd written in private journals. Amara discovered entire sections of her doctoral thesis, word for word, in the fourth layer. And Eleanor found notes in her late husband's handwriting. Calculations from his work on cyclical cosmology, ideas he'd only ever discussed with her in their kitchen late at night. "We sent this," Eleanor said finally, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. "Not aliens. Not some other intelligence. Us, humanity, from a previous iteration of the universe." Tom sat down heavily. "That's why it contains our DNA, our names, our personal writings. We're receiving a message from ourselves, from our descendants," Marcus corrected. "Or our ancestors, depending on how you think about cyclical time. From people who lived through what we're about to experience. And they're warning us," Eleanor continued. "This convergence, whatever it is, they knew it was coming. They documented how to survive it and sent that information backward through the end of their universe into the beginning of ours." The implications were staggering. Every person in the room sat in silence, processing what it meant. They weren't making first contact with alien intelligence. They were receiving a letter from their own species, sent across the death and rebirth of everything that existed. Amara broke the silence. "If this is from a previous humanity, then the convergence must be universal. Not just Earth, but everything, the entire cosmos." The fifth layer of the signal confirmed it. Detailed descriptions of what they were calling the convergence, a breakdown of reality itself at the quantum level. The universe, the message explained, was not stable. It existed in a delicate balance of forces, and that balance was cyclical. Every 13.8 billion years, give or take, the balance shifted. Reality began to collapse, starting at the quantum level and cascading up through atomic structures, molecular bonds, all the way to visible matter. The process took approximately 2 weeks from first detection to total collapse. And it was beginning now. Marcus studied the technical specifications. The devices the signal instructed them to build were quantum resonance field generators. They would create pockets of stable space-time at the 13 coordinates, essentially holding reality together while the rest of the universe collapsed and reformed around them. "So we survive in bubbles while everything else ends?" Amara asked. "Not just survive," Eleanor said, decoding more of the message. "We preserve information, matter, the pattern of what was, so it can seed what comes next. That's why the locations include major research facilities, geologically stable areas, places with genetic diversity. We're supposed to be an ark, like Noah's flood, but for the entire universe," Tom said quietly. Eleanor thought about David, his theories about cyclical cosmology that she dismissed as too speculative. He'd been right all along. The universe was a phoenix, dying and reborn eternally. And somehow humanity had found a way to survive the transition, to carry knowledge and life forward through the end of everything. She pulled up the final sections of the fifth layer. Construction requirements, power calculations, deployment schedules. It was all there, a complete blueprint for survival. But the timeline was brutal. They had 9 days until the convergence reached catastrophic levels. Building 13 quantum field generators in 9 days would require global coordination, unlimited resources, and perfect execution. "We need to present this to Hawthorne," Tom said, "and beyond her, to world leaders. This isn't a national security issue anymore. This is a species survival issue." "They'll think we're insane," Marcus pointed out. Eleanor looked at the data on her screen. Layers of messages from people who shared her name, her DNA, her memories in some incomprehensible way. "They probably will, but the gravitational distortions are undeniable. The signal is real, and we have 9 days to convince them to trust us." She thought about Sarah, about the conversation they were supposed to have tonight, about all the times she'd chosen work over family, convinced herself that the cosmic questions mattered more than the human ones right in front of her. Now the cosmic question was whether humanity would survive, and the only way to answer it was through massive human coordination, cooperation, trust. All the things she'd never been very good at. She picked up her phone and called Sarah. Her daughter answered on the second ring. "Mom, I thought you'd be too busy to call." "I am busy," Eleanor said. "But you're more important. Can you come to Goddard tomorrow? There's something I need to tell you. Something the world is about to learn, but I want you to hear it from me first." There was a pause. "This sounds serious." "It is. Sarah, I need you to understand something. I've made terrible choices, prioritized work over you, over everyone. I've been searching for meaning in the stars while missing the meaning right here. But what I've found changes everything. And before the world goes crazy, I want to make sure you know that I love you. That you matter more than any discovery. Mom, you're scaring me. I know. Come tomorrow. I'll explain everything. And Sarah, thank you for not giving up on me. After they hung up, Eleanor returned to the data. 9 days to save the world. First, she'd save her relationship with her daughter. Then she'd figure out the rest. Sarah arrived at Goddard the next morning looking worried and confused. Eleanor met her at the security checkpoint, and for a moment they just stood there, mother and daughter, separated by 5 years of accumulated distance and hurt. Then Sarah stepped forward and hugged her, and Eleanor held on tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her daughter's shampoo. They walked to Eleanor's office in silence. The building was chaos, people rushing between workstations, phones ringing constantly, the barely controlled panic of a situation spiraling beyond anyone's ability to manage. Sarah took it all in with worried eyes. Mom, what's going on? Eleanor closed her office door and gestured for Sarah to sit. Then she did something she rarely did. She sat beside her daughter instead of behind the protective barrier of her desk. What I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible. But I need you to trust that everything I say is true, verified by data and multiple independent analyses. She explained it all. The signal, the quantum entanglement, the gravitational distortions, the decoded messages containing human DNA, personal writings, instructions for survival, the convergence, the collapse of reality itself. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to dawning horror. You're saying the universe is ending, Sarah said when Eleanor finished. In 9 days. Not ending exactly, transitioning, collapsing and reforming. It's happened before, apparently infinite times. But yes, in 9 days, if we do nothing, everything we know will cease to exist in its current form. Sarah stood and walked to the window, looking out at the parking lot where her life had been normal just moments ago. And these generators you need to build. They'll save us. They'll save some of us. Create pockets of stability where life and information can survive the transition. We become the seed for the next iteration. That's insane. I know. You're sure about this? You're absolutely certain. Eleanor thought about the question. In science, certainty was always provisional, always subject to new evidence. But the data was overwhelming, the pattern undeniable. As certain as I can be about anything. Sarah turned from the window. Why are you telling me this before the public announcement? Because when the world finds out, everything is going to change. There'll be panic, chaos, maybe violence. I wanted you to hear it from me first. And I wanted to tell you something else. Eleanor stood and joined her daughter at the window. I've spent your entire life chasing the stars. Missing birthdays, school events, important moments. I convinced myself it was for something greater, that understanding the cosmos justified the sacrifices. But Sarah, the only thing that matters now is that I love you. That I'm sorry for all the times I wasn't there. That if we survive this, if we get through to the other side, I want to do better. Sarah's eyes were bright with tears. You really think we might not survive? I think we have a chance. A real chance. But it's going to take everything humanity has. And yes, some of us won't make it. They stood together in silence, watching the morning sun illuminate the building's facade. Finally, Sarah spoke. What do you need me to do? Stay close, stay safe. And forgive me for being a terrible mother. You weren't terrible. You were just absent. There's a difference. Sarah wiped her eyes. And for what it's worth, I am proud of you. Even when I'm angry, even when I wish you'd been around more, I'm proud that my mother is the kind of person who spends her life asking the biggest questions. Before Eleanor could respond, her phone rang. Tom's name on the screen. She answered, and his voice was urgent. Conference room now. We decoded the 6th layer. Eleanor and Sarah hurried down the hallway together. The conference room was packed with team members, all staring at the main screen. Amara stood at the control panel, her face pale. What is it? Eleanor asked. Amara pulled up the decoded section. It was another message, written in the same clear English as before. But this one was different. Personal in a way the technical specifications hadn't been. Eleanor read the words on the screen and felt the world shift beneath her feet. The message was addressed to her specifically, and it was written in her own handwriting. Not just similar to her handwriting, but exact, down to the way she crossed her T's and looped her G's. She recognized the style from her journals, from notes she'd made in margins of papers, from the private shorthand she used when thinking through problems. Her message read, "To Eleanor Vance, from Eleanor Vance, if you're reading this, you've decoded far enough to understand what's coming. The convergence cannot be stopped. It has already begun. By the time you detect the signal, you are already living inside the collapse. The countdown I embedded reached 0 3 weeks ago, the day Webb first picked up the transmission. Everything since then has been occurring within the convergence event itself. Time is already nonlinear. Reality is already breaking down, just slowly enough that you haven't noticed yet. The generators will work, but only if you follow the protocol exactly. I know this is difficult to accept. I remember being you, standing where you're standing, reading these words and thinking they couldn't possibly be true. But Eleanor, I wrote this message 73 years from now, in a life I lived before this one, during the previous universe's convergence. I sent it backward through the collapse because I failed. We failed. Our generators didn't activate properly. We made critical errors in the coordination sequence. Humanity was not preserved. This is your chance, my chance, our chance to get it right. Trust Marcus. He won't survive the activation, but his sacrifice is necessary. Protect Amara. Her algorithms are essential for the next iteration. And Eleanor, please be better to Sarah than I was. Don't wait until it's too late to tell her she matters. I never got that chance. You still have 9 days. Use them wisely. The universe is counting on you. I'm counting on you. We're the same person, separated by the death and rebirth of everything, and I'm sorry I'm leaving this burden for you. But there's no one else who can carry it. The room was utterly silent. Eleanor read the message 3 times, each word sending fresh shocks through her system. This wasn't just a message from a previous humanity. This was a message from her, from a version of herself who had lived and died in another universe, who had failed to save anyone, and who had somehow found a way to reach backward through the end of everything to give herself a second chance. "This is impossible," someone whispered. But it wasn't impossible. The data supported it. The quantum entanglement, the personal details, the handwriting analysis that Amara would certainly run, and that would certainly confirm it was authentic. Eleanor had written this message, would write it, had already written it in a future that was also the past. Sarah's hand found hers. "Mom?" Eleanor couldn't speak. She thought about David's theories of cyclical time, of information surviving universal collapse. He'd been right about all of it, and now his widow was reading a letter from herself, sent across the death of existence, trying to save a world that had already failed once. Marcus spoke quietly. "The message mentions me. Says I won't survive the activation." "It mentions all of us," Amara said. "Specific roles we each play. As if this has all happened before." "Because it has," Eleanor found her voice. "Everything we're experiencing now we experienced before, in the previous universe, and we failed. The message is a guide written by people who know exactly what mistakes we'll make because they already made them." Tom leaned against the table. "So we're living in a loop, doomed to repeat the same events, unless we change them," Eleanor said. "That's why I sent the message, why I wrote the protocol. To give us the information we needed to do it differently this time." She looked at the screen again, at her own handwriting, warning her about Marcus's death, about the coordination failures, about 9 days to get everything right. The weight of it was crushing. She wasn't just trying to save humanity. She was trying to correct her own past mistakes, made in a life she didn't remember living. "We need to tell Hawthorne everything," Tom said. "All of it. The convergence is already happening. We're not preparing for a future event. We're in the middle of it right now. Eleanor nodded slowly. The signal wasn't a warning about something coming to their galaxy. It was a message from their galaxy, from their Earth, from themselves, sent backward through time to save a world that had already ended once. And they had 9 days to make sure it didn't end again. The emergency session with world leaders happened via secure video conference that evening. Eleanor found herself addressing presidents, prime ministers, generals, and scientists from every major nation. She explained the convergence, showed them the decoded messages, presented the evidence that reality was already breaking down around them. She showed them her own letter from herself, proof that this had happened before and would happen again unless they acted now. The reactions ranged from disbelief to panic to grim acceptance. Some leaders demanded independent verification. Others wanted to know why their own scientists hadn't detected this. A few suggested it was an elaborate hoax or some kind of attack. But the gravitational data was undeniable, and it matched what observatories around the world were reporting. The distortions were real and accelerating. General Hawthorne took control of the logistics. We have 9 days to build 13 quantum field generators at specific coordinates across the globe. Dr. Vance, what resources do we need? Eleanor pulled up the specifications from the protocol. Massive energy sources, particle acceleration capabilities, quantum computing infrastructure, specialized materials, and most critically perfect timing. All 13 generators must activate within 3.7 seconds of each other, or the field won't form properly. That's impossible, someone said. It's what we have to do anyway, Eleanor replied. The next hours dissolved into frantic planning. Teams assembled at each coordinate location. Resources diverted from every available source. CERN prepared to modify their equipment. Yellowstone deployed portable nuclear reactors to provide the necessary power. Military forces mobilized to secure the sites and manage the inevitable civilian panic once the truth became public. Tom coordinated with NASA administration, repurposing every bit of budget and equipment for the effort. Marcus worked with physicists worldwide, translating the protocol's technical specifications into actionable engineering plans. Amara focused on the timing algorithms, the precise coordination that would make or break their survival. And Eleanor became the public face of the end of the world. The announcement went global at midnight. Every news channel, every radio station, every social media platform. Eleanor stood at a podium in the White House, exhausted and terrified, and told the world that the universe was ending, that they had 9 days, that there was a chance, a real chance, but success required unprecedented cooperation. The world's response was predictable. Panic in the streets, stock markets crashed, riots in some cities, prayer vigils in others. Some people refused to believe it. Others embraced it with apocalyptic fervor. But underneath the chaos, something remarkable began to happen. People started helping each other. Borders opened. Enemies collaborated. The 13 generator sites became focuses of global effort. Thousands of volunteers showing up to assist in any way they could. Sarah stayed with Eleanor through it all, sleeping in her office, bringing food when Eleanor forgot to eat, being the anchor her mother had never been for her. They talked late into the nights between briefings, healing years of distance with honest conversation about fear and love and regret. Why did you choose this life? Sarah asked one night, both of them too exhausted to sleep but too wired to rest. Eleanor thought about the question. Because I wanted to understand. That was always the answer. Why does anything exist? What's our place in it? Are we alone? They seemed like the most important questions. And now I know the universe is infinite and cyclical, and we're part of something so vast and ancient that it makes all my questions seem small. But Sarah, the only thing that feels real right now is you. This relationship, the love between a mother and daughter that I almost destroyed. Sarah squeezed her hand. You didn't destroy it. You just forgot to water it for a while. Plants can survive a lot of neglect if the roots are strong enough. On day 5, Marcus collapsed. His ALS had progressed rapidly under the stress, and his body was failing. They moved him to a private room, but he refused to stop working. He coordinated generator construction from his hospital bed, voice-to-text software translating his whispered instructions into technical documents. Eleanor visited him that evening. He looked frail, diminished, but his eyes were clear and determined. "The message says I won't survive the activation," he said without preamble. "The message is from a previous iteration. We can change things, Eleanor. We both know the protocol is specific. The CERN generator requires manual oversight during activation. Someone has to be there, maintaining the field as it forms. The radiation exposure will be lethal. Then we'll find another way." Marcus smiled. "There is no other way. I've run the calculations 50 times. And Eleanor, I've known about my diagnosis for 8 months. I have maybe a year left, probably less, watching my body shut down piece by piece. This gives my death meaning. Let me have that." Eleanor felt tears slide down her face. "You're my best friend. I know. And you're mine. That's why I need you to promise me something. When this works, when humanity survives, you'll live differently. You'll spend time with Sarah. You'll forgive yourself for all the things you think you did wrong. You'll understand that searching for meaning in the stars was never wrong. But neither is finding meaning in the people right beside you. Marcus, I can't lose you. You won't. I'll be woven into the fabric of the next universe, part of the resonance field that keeps reality stable. That's a hell of a legacy." She stayed with him until he fell asleep, holding his hand, remembering 30 years of friendship, of late nights discussing the cosmos, of quiet support through David's death and her professional humiliation, and all the small daily struggles that make up a life. Marcus had been there for all of it, and now she had to let him go. Day 6 brought the first visible signs of convergence. Objects began phasing in and out of existence, appearing solid one moment and translucent the next. People reported seeing impossible things. Dinosaurs walking through city streets, buildings that didn't exist, loved ones who died years ago. Time was becoming non-linear, past and future bleeding into present. The generator sites worked around the clock. At Yellowstone, engineers assembled the massive quantum resonance apparatus under Eleanor's direct supervision. She'd chosen to oversee the North American site personally, partly because of her expertise, but mostly because the protocol had specified it. Her previous self had left detailed notes about the Yellowstone generator, including modifications to the original design that were crucial for success. Amara coordinated from Goddard, her algorithms syncing all 13 sites through quantum-encrypted communications. The timing had to be perfect. She'd built in redundancies and fail-safes, but ultimately it came down to human precision at the moment of activation. Tom managed the impossible logistics of keeping the operation running while civilization frayed around them. Power grids fluctuated as space-time distortions affected electrical systems. Supply chains collapsed as people abandoned their jobs to spend remaining days with loved ones. But somehow, impossibly, the work continued, humanity rising to meet its greatest challenge. On day 7, Sarah stood beside Eleanor at the Yellowstone site, watching teams run final equipment tests. The generator was nearly complete, a massive structure of superconducting coils and quantum computing clusters, powered by portable nuclear reactors that hummed with barely contained energy. "Mum, if this doesn't work," Sarah began. "It will work. But if it doesn't, I want you to know I forgive you. For all of it. I understand now why you did what you did." Eleanor pulled her daughter close. "It works. Because we've already done this before, and we learned from our mistakes. Your mother, my previous self, she failed because she didn't follow the protocol exactly. She second-guessed herself, made changes she thought were improvements. But this time, we do it exactly as written." Day 8 arrived with reality increasingly unstable. The sky flickered between blue and colors that had no names, physics defying itself in ways that made perception painful. People could no longer trust their senses. Madness spreading as human brains tried to process the impossible. But the generators were ready. All 13, scattered across the planet, prepared for synchronized activation in less than 24 hours. Eleanor walked the Yellowstone site one final time, checking every connection, every calculation, every detail against the protocol. She carried her leather-bound journal, the one that matched the notation style in the decoded messages, and made notes exactly as the previous Eleanor must have done. That evening, final communications went out to all team leaders. Marcus at CERN, barely able to speak but still coherent. Amara at Goddard, fingers flying across keyboards as she prepared the activation sequence. Tom coordinating globally, ensuring every site was synchronized. And 9 other team leaders Eleanor had trained over the past week. Good people willing to die, if necessary, to save humanity. Eleanor called Sarah into the command trailer. "I need you to leave. Go to the bunker we prepared. You'll be safe there. I'm staying with you. Sarah, the radiation levels during activation will be dangerous. I need to be here, but you don't. Mom, I spent my whole life watching you choose work over family. I'm not leaving now. If you stay, I stay." Eleanor wanted to argue, but she saw the determination in her daughter's face. The same stubbornness she'd inherited from her mother. And Eleanor realized that maybe this was what the previous iteration had missed. Connection, love, the very human bonds that made survival worth fighting for. "Okay," she said, "we stay together." Day 9 arrived not with sunrise, but with a false dawn, light bleeding from tears in the fabric of space. Eleanor had slept 2 hours, her head on Sarah's shoulder in the command trailer, both of them too exhausted to move to proper beds. They woke to alarms, signaling the final countdown sequence. Teams across the planet prepared for activation. At CERN, Marcus was wheeled into position beside the primary control console, oxygen mask over his face, trembling fingers ready on the manual override switches. At each of the 13 sites, dedicated men and women stood ready to give everything for humanity's survival. Eleanor reviewed the activation checklist one more time. The protocol was explicit. Generators must initialize in sequence, each one triggering quantum entanglement with the others, building a network of stable space-time that would hold reality together while the rest of the universe collapsed and reformed around them. The 3.7-second synchronization window was absolute. Too early or too late, and the field would fail to form. Everything depended on Amara's coordination algorithms and human beings executing their roles perfectly under impossible circumstances. "All sites report ready." Amara's voice came through the communication system from Goddard. She sounded calm, but Eleanor heard the underlying tension. They'd practiced this sequence 100 times in simulation. Now they'd get one chance to do it for real. "Yellowstone ready," Eleanor confirmed. Sarah stood beside her at the monitoring station, watching readouts that tracked power levels and quantum field stability. One by one, the other sites checked in: CERN, Sahara, Amazon, Tokyo, Siberia, Antarctica. 13 voices across the planet, human voices affirming readiness to face the end of everything. Tom's voice came through the general channel. "This is it, people. Everything humanity has ever been, everything we hope to become, rests on the next 10 minutes. I know you're all scared. I'm terrified. But I also know that you're the finest people this species has ever produced. Whatever happens, it's been an honor." Eleanor felt Sarah's hand slip into hers. She squeezed gently, then keyed her microphone. "Amara, initiate countdown sequence." Countdown initiated. "Activation in T-10 minutes." The next 10 minutes stretched like years. Eleanor watched the Yellowstone generator come online, power building in the superconducting coils, quantum processes achieving the precise entanglement states specified in the protocol. Around the site, reality continued its slow dissolution. A herd of elk appeared on a distant hillside, transparent like ghosts. The old faithful geyser erupted with water that flowed upward instead of down. Space-time was dying, and they were racing to create pockets of sanity within the madness. At 5 minutes, visible distortions reached the site perimeter. The fence line began phasing in and out of existence. One of the technicians cried out as she saw her own future self walking past, translucent and overlay with her present position. Time was collapsing inward. All sites maintained focus, Eleanor called out. 3 minutes to activation. Power levels at 98%. Quantum entanglement field stable. She watched her instrumentation, cross-referencing every reading against the protocol specifications. The previous Eleanor had failed because she'd made assumptions, tried to optimize systems she didn't fully understand. This time, Eleanor followed the instructions exactly, trusting her future self's hard-won knowledge. 2 minutes, Amar announced. All sites showing nominal readiness. Synchronization locks engaged. Marcus's voice, weak but determined, came through from CERN. Eleanor, it's been a privilege. Tell Sarah that her mother is the bravest person I've ever known. Eleanor's vision blurred with tears. Marcus, I love you. Thank you for everything. 1 minute. All team leaders confirm final authorization. Eleanor looked at Sarah, memorizing her daughter's face. If this failed, she had 1 minute left with the person she loved most. If it succeeded, Sarah would survive to see a new universe born. Either way, this moment mattered more than anything Eleanor had ever done. Yellowstone confirms final authorization, she said. The other sites followed. 12 more voices, 12 more confirmations. Humanity unified in its final act, choosing survival over surrender. 30 seconds. Generator fields charging to activation threshold. The Yellowstone site hummed with barely contained power. Eleanor could feel it in her teeth, a subsonic vibration that resonated through her bones. The quantum processors were creating entanglement links with the other 12 sites. Invisible threads connecting them across thousands of miles, preparing to weave a net that would catch reality as it fell. 15 seconds. All sites green. Synchronization holding. Sarah squeezed Eleanor's hand tighter. I love you, Mom. I love you too. So much. 10, 9, 8. Eleanor's hand hovered over the activation switch. Everything converged on this moment. Every choice she'd ever made, every night spent studying the stars, every time she'd chosen work over family, it all led here. One button press to save humanity or watch it end. 7, 6, 5. Reality outside the command trailer had become abstract. Trees existed in multiple time periods simultaneously, ancient and young and burning and healthy all at once. The ground rippled like water. The distinction between solid and liquid and gas was breaking down. 4, 3, 2. Eleanor pressed the activation switch. The Yellowstone generator engaged with a sound like reality tearing. A sphere of stable spacetime erupted from the quantum coils, expanding at the speed of light, creating a bubble where physics still functioned normally. Eleanor watched the boundary expand past the command trailer, past the generator structure, out toward the site perimeter. On activation, across the planet 13 generators fired simultaneously. Eleanor's board lit up with confirmation signals. CERN, Sahara, Tokyo, all 13 sites achieving activation within the 3.7-second window. The quantum entanglement links snapped into place, 13 bubbles of stable reality connecting through dimensions human perception couldn't grasp. And then Marcus screamed. Eleanor heard it through the communication link, a sound of agony as lethal radiation flooded the CERN facility. Marcus had positioned himself at the manual control station, knowing he'd take the full force of the generator's output. He'd chosen this death, embraced it, but that didn't make it any less terrible to hear. "Marcus!" Eleanor shouted, but there was nothing she could do. He was thousands of miles away, dying so that the CERN generator would stabilize properly. His voice came through one last time, barely audible. "It's working. Field is stable. Eleanor, I can see it. I can see the whole pattern. It's beautiful." Then silence. Mara's voice thick with tears. "CERN generator holding. Entanglement network at 97%. Marcus's readings are flat. He's gone." Eleanor felt something break inside her chest. Her best friend, dead. His sacrifice woven into the quantum fabric that was holding their universe together. But there was no time to grieve. The generators were active, but stabilization wasn't complete. "Status report, all sites," she commanded, forcing her voice to remain steady. The reports came in. 10 sites nominal. Sahara showing power fluctuations. Tokyo experiencing unexpected quantum feedback. Eleanor pulled up the technical readouts, comparing them to the protocol specifications. Both issues were manageable within acceptable parameters. Outside the Yellowstone bubble, the universe was ending. Through the command trailer's windows, Eleanor watched the convergence reach its peak. The sky wasn't sky anymore, just fractal patterns of light and void. Matter dissolved into quantum foam. Space and time became the same thing, indistinguishable and meaningless. But inside the generator fields, reality persisted. The 13 sites became islands of sanity in an ocean of chaos. Eleanor could see people on the video feeds from other locations, crying, praying, holding each other as they watched the rest of the world die. Sarah stood at the window, tears streaming down her face. Everyone outside the bubbles. They're all gone, aren't they? Eleanor joined her, looking out at the dissolution. Yes, everyone who didn't make it to the sites. I'm sorry. That's 7 billion people, Mom. 7 billion. I know, the weight of it was crushing. They'd saved thousands, maybe tens of thousands, across all 13 sites. But billions had died. No time for evacuation. No way to protect everyone. Eleanor had known this would happen. Had been told by her previous self that survival meant accepting massive loss. But knowing it intellectually and watching it happen were different things. Generator field stabilizing, Amara reported. Network cohesion at 99%. We're holding. Eleanor monitored the quantum readings. The generators were creating a lattice of stable space-time, a skeleton that would support the reformation process. As the universe collapsed and rebirthed around them, these 13 points would remain constant, seeds of the old universe carrying forward into the new. The Tokyo generator failed. Eleanor saw it in the data before the site leader's scream confirmed it. Power fluctuations had cascaded into catastrophic feedback. The quantum field collapsed, and the bubble of stable reality popped like a soap bubble. Everyone at the Tokyo site, thousands of people, instantly ceased to exist as the convergence consumed them. 12 sites remaining, Amara said, her voice shaking. Network compensating. Cohesion at 94%. Still within operational parameters. But the protocol had specified 13 sites. Eleanor checked her notes, the handwritten instructions from her previous self. If any generator fails, implement backup protocol Delta. She pulled up the backup specifications. They required redistributing power loads across remaining sites, increasing output to compensate for the lost node. It would work, but it would stress systems beyond their design limits, and it would expose site personnel to higher radiation levels. All sites implement backup protocol Delta, Eleanor ordered. Increase power output by 8%. Monitor radiation exposure. At Yellowstone, Eleanor felt the generator's output increase. The hum became a roar. Radiation warnings lit up her board, levels climbing into the dangerous range. But the field was holding, the network compensating for Tokyo's loss. Mum, we should go to the shielded bunker, Sarah said, watching the radiation readings. Not yet. I need to maintain manual oversight through the convergence phase. You're going to kill yourself. Eleanor met her daughter's eyes. Maybe, but this is what I'm here for. What I was always here for. You can go to the bunker. Please, Sarah, I need to know you'll survive this. Sarah shook her head. I told you. We stay together. Eleanor pulled her daughter close, and together they watched the universe die and be reborn. Outside the bubble, existence itself was reforming, quantum fields settling into new configurations, matter coalescing from pure energy. The convergence had reached its nadir. Now came the rebirth, and inside 13 bubbles of stable space-time, humanity waited to see what kind of universe would emerge. 6 months after the convergence, Sarah Vance stood before a joint session of Congress, explaining what humanity had endured. She'd become the voice of survival, the one who could translate her mother's sacrifice into words that helped people understand. Eleanor had survived the radiation exposure, barely, spending 3 months in hospital, recovering from damage that would shorten her life, but not end it immediately. Marcus was gone, his name now inscribed on memorials at every generator site. 7 other team leaders had died as well, their bodies literally absorbed into the quantum resonance fields woven into the fabric of space-time itself. The Tokyo site personnel had vanished entirely, and billions more had been lost in the convergence, their existence erased when the universe reformed. But humanity endured. The 12 remaining sites had held. The new universe that emerged from the collapse was essentially identical to the old one, physics functioning the same way, stars forming in familiar patterns. The generator fields would hold for approximately 10,000 years, giving humanity time to build permanent solutions to spread across the cosmos, to ensure that when the next convergence came in 13.8 billion years, they'd be ready. The James Webb Space Telescope, miraculously preserved at one of the safe sites, was renamed the Vance Chen Array in honor of Eleanor and Marcus. It now pointed outward at a universe that was both ancient and newly born, searching for signs of other civilizations that might have survived their own convergences. Eleanor had retired from NASA, accepting that her radiation-damaged body couldn't handle the rigors of active research. She lived quietly in a cottage near the Chesapeake Bay, the same bay where she'd scattered David's ashes years ago. She wrote papers about the convergence, about cyclical cosmology, about the mathematics of survival. But mostly, she spent time with Sarah. They had dinner together twice a week. They took walks along the shore. They talked about everything, the conversations they should have had decades ago but were having now. Sarah was engaged, planning a wedding, thinking about children. Eleanor would be a grandmother, assuming she lived long enough. The radiation damage made that uncertain. Tom Berkeley had retired too, spending his final years consulting for the new International Convergence Preparedness Organization. He'd given his last interview revealing everything he'd known, how he'd recruited Eleanor specifically because the protocol had named her. The conspiracy theories flourished, but Tom didn't care. He'd saved the world by manipulating events, and he'd do it again without hesitation. Amara Okafor continued the work at Goddard, now directing the entire SETI program. She monitored the resonance fields, ensuring they remained stable. She'd written comprehensive accounts of Marcus's contributions, of Eleanor's leadership, of the thousands who'd died, and the tens of thousands who'd survived. Her algorithms had saved humanity, and she was using them now to ensure the next convergence would claim even fewer lives. On a cool October evening, Eleanor sat on her cottage porch watching the sunset. Sarah was visiting, both of them wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill. The sky was brilliant orange and gold, a normal sky in a normal universe that would last billions of years before the cycle repeated. "Do you think about it?" Sarah asked. "The other Eleanor who sent the message?" Eleanor nodded. "Every day. I wonder if she had a daughter, if they reconciled, if she died, knowing she'd given herself another chance. You think it worked? In her universe?" "No, the message said she failed. That's why she sent it backward. To warn us about the mistakes she'd made." "But Sarah, I think maybe that was the point. Each iteration learns from the last. Each universe's humanity gets a little better at surviving. Maybe eventually we'll figure out how to survive without loss, without sacrifice." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad you're here, Mom. I'm glad we got this time." "Me too." They watched the sunset in comfortable silence. Eleanor thought about the stars that would emerge once darkness fell. Ancient light from distant suns, some of which might host their own civilizations, preparing for their own convergences. She thought about the message she'd eventually need to send backward through time, instructions for the previous iteration, closing the loop that allowed survival to propagate across universal death and rebirth. But mostly, she thought about how lucky she was to be sitting on a porch with her daughter, watching a perfectly normal sunset in a universe that almost didn't exist. After spending her life searching for meaning in the stars, she'd finally found it right here, in the simple act of being present with someone she loved. The universe was infinite and cyclical, dying and reborn in eternal repetition. But this moment, this evening, this relationship rebuilt from ashes, it felt permanent. It felt like something that would survive even the end of everything. And maybe, Eleanor thought as the first stars appeared overhead, that was the real message she'd sent back through time. Not just technical specifications and warnings about mistakes, but the understanding that love and connection transcend even universal death. That the only thing worth saving is each other. Far above, the Vance-Chen array captured new data, monitoring the cosmos for signs of civilizations that had also survived convergence. And somewhere, 13.8 billion years in the future, another Eleanor Vance was about to detect a signal she couldn't explain.